All right, we are live. So Jason Hull here with DoorGrow on the DoorGrow show. And today we have Tony LeBlanc here with us of Ground Floor Property Management. And Tony, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and where you're at.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. So as you stated, my name is Tony LeBlanc. I am located out in the East Coast, out here in Canada. I run a management firm for probably about the last 7 years now. Currently with 2 locations, one in Moncton, New Brunswick, and another one in Prince Edward Island, Canada. We have, as of to date, probably around 1,300 doors, 1,400 doors between the 2 locations. And we're just always growing. The last few years have been really, really good in terms of growth, and we're continuing to get into new markets right now and different types of product. So we're traditionally we've been experts in large multifamily. We're starting to dabble a little bit more into single family, just because of the market conditions in our area. But yeah, we kind of dabble in all the different sectors, different sizes.
Cool. So give people an idea of how big your company is.
Our main location, we're roughly around, I think the last count was around 22 employees, about $1 million a year type operation. So fairly decent size for a property manager. Typically in this business, you see a lot of managers out there that are maybe 3 or 4 employees with a few hundred doors. Right away, when I started the company, that was not my ambition. I knew I wanted to go big, and we're now starting to see that growth, and getting into the different cities is our next key.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome stuff. All right. So Tony, so the reason I brought Tony in, wanted to interview him, is one, we had met. He was curious about what we do, and we have been chatting, but also we're connected on Facebook through some common groups, I guess, Facebook groups and stuff. And he had posted a video about rent increases. And I don't do property management. I provide services for property managers, but I love hearing new ideas. And I haven't heard too many people talk about rent increases, especially in the single family area, but I'm sure it's something that every property manager deals with and struggles with. And so explain to me the challenges with rent increases that property managers deal with.
The biggest issue with rent increases, especially in the different markets. So I'll take, for example, if you own some properties in a down market where whether the vacancies are high turnovers, there's a huge fear within property owners and some property managers that prevent them from increasing their rents or sticking to their guns and doing their rent increases because of the fear of loss. Their fear of losing their tenants and just having more vacancies and higher turnovers. So they let this go on, depending on how quickly the market can rebound. Sometimes you can see this go
Tony,
on for
still
2,
with
3,
us?
4 rents, and at the same time providing incentives and different things to get new tenants in. It's another disaster waiting to happen on that rent roll. It can really, really hurt you in the long term.
All right. So Tony, can you hear me okay? Tony, you still with me? You look like you froze. I'm going to pause the recording here. All right. Tony, can you hear me now? All right, we're back. We've got you back, and we'll keep you as long as we can maintain this internet connection here. Hopefully it works. Just be careful with the phone. I'm
not moving it.
Put too much.
I'm trying to stay away.
Stuff around it. All right. So Tony, on the subject of rent increases, so you mentioned some of the problems. Property managers have fears regarding this. The owners of the properties have fears regarding this.
Yep.
The tenants are afraid of rent increases too. So if everybody's afraid of all this, I'm guessing that most property managers or a lot of property managers just try to avoid raising the rent.
A lot of them do, yes.
And so I would imagine what the problem then happens if you're only keeping on a door for maybe 3, maybe 5 years, or whatever the case may be, whatever the lifetime value is in their market typically. At some point they're thinking, I need more rent. And maybe the tenant leaves. And then unless they're selling the property, their only option, then they might be thinking, I need a new property manager. Somebody that's going to evaluate this, and then you're losing out on opportunities. So how do we solve this problem?
Yeah. What happens, and I'll give you a kind of it's a great way of summarizing. I'll give you a quick example. We have an owner, smaller property, 6-unit, multi-unit. He's had it for years. It's paid off. He doesn't have a mortgage on it. Calls us up the other day and says, guys, I'm looking to sell. Can you let's have a chat, review the numbers, and let me know what you think I could get out of it. And, putting all the numbers in my spreadsheet, lo and behold, the property's completely upside down. His heating costs and utility costs in the property are way out of line. He hasn't done an increase in over 10 years. And his building is just underperforming. And the cap rate and the valuation was so low that we told him, I don't know how or what price or how to price this, because if any investor looks at it without a mortgage, it had a negative cash flow.
And so this isn't even just that he waited 10 years. It's basically been becoming a bigger problem for 10 years.
Yeah. Right.
Because now he's got a whole bunch of tenants that really couldn't afford to live there probably normally.
Yeah.
And so then now he's made this problem that in order to raise the rent, he's going to have to do it on each new lease, right? And
yes,
basically
absolutely.
Have tons of turnover.
Yeah. And you can't just do that in any different jurisdiction that you're in. Specifically here, if I use the example, I have to give my tenants usually at least a 3 or 1 month notice of a rent increase. We're lucky here; we can kind of do it anytime throughout the lease, but you still have to give them notice. But even doing at that point, he was so far back. His rents are 5 to 7 years old. It would take him 5 years of increases at probably 10 to 15% to get his rent up where he needed to be in order for the rent roll to even cash flow positive. That's how in the hole he got.
Man.
Bad situation to be in. And what it's incredibly, there's a direct correlation, I believe, from rent increases and the way that a property is maintained. So this particular building, every time we had to do work in there, it was a bit of a struggle to get the owner to agree whether we had to rip out carpets, put some new laminate flooring down, get a stove replaced, kind of minor things that need to be done over the years. It was always, I don't want to say a fight, but it was always, it required multiple discussions. The reason being his cash flow wasn't there. Every time he had to do a repair, it was an out-of-pocket expense to him.
Yeah, so this is a really good example of the cycle of suck, which I talk about sometimes. It's right. Yeah. So you've got this property, the owner, it could have been at one point a really great property, right? And it could be a great property. The problem is a good property becomes a bad property if it has a bad owner. And if the owner kind of puts the clamp down and doesn't allow you to do certain things, then either your option is to baby them and give them what they want, or to fire them, or to challenge them to do it our way or the highway, right? Yeah. So in the cycle, so the cycle of suck, for those that haven't heard this before, just real quick, if you take on crappy clients, then you're crappy owners or whatever. And then you're going to have crappy properties. Even if the property's good, it will be a crappy property, even if it's immaculate, beautiful single family home. If the owner's not willing to fix things, always pushing back, making things difficult, etc., for you to manage it, then it takes a lot more time, energy, and resources to do it, a lot more staff. It's a higher cost for you to manage this property. And one good property is a good property is really easy to manage, but one bad property could take just as much time as 10, maybe even 100 good properties, depending on how bad the situation is. And so you have bad owner, bad property. And then what kind of tenants are you going to have? Well, they're going to be crappy tenants because they're going to be upset. They're going to be frustrated. And you then become this shit shield for like a slumlord, essentially. And then, which it sounds like you're describing. And then what kind of reviews does the property management company get? Because you're the one all the tenants are focused on, negative reviews. And then the cycle continues. Because if you have negative reputation online, what kind of owners are you going to attract? More of those type of owners. And so it all starts with being picky about the types of clients you allow to stay in your portfolio or you bring on. So what's the light at the end of this tunnel here?
Yeah, I think what happens is a lot of property owners and real estate investors sometimes forget that these buildings, I look at each one of our buildings as a little mini business. They're a set of books for us that we account for on a monthly basis. They have income and they have expenses and they have people. To me, that's the definition of a business. One of the major goals in any business is to always have your income increase over time and decrease your expenses as much as possible. So most property owners, again, kind of alluded to in the article, is there's so much focus put on decreasing costs and watching costs, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of people take their eye off the ball in terms of that income. They get in a comfortable position. Market is dictating this, and they're a little gun shy, and they just they don't want to disturb anything. And that's kind of how they get into the situation.
And this is one of the reasons people hire a property manager, because they don't want to have to deal with this emotional issue of raising rent and being the bad guy in their mind.
Yep.
Right.
We have a strong belief in our firm that it all starts on the day that lease is signed with that tenant. All of the expectations, all the cards can be put on the table, so there's absolute transparency between us, the property managers, and our tenants. Where I live and where we operate, we have a section in our leases that specifies, are you going to be raising the rent within this term of the lease? We always put a clause in there that specifies that the rent will be increasing so that the tenant is prepared that following year on the renewal of their lease, that they know, okay, there's going to be an increase coming. And we always tell them that it's never going to be a huge jump, $50, $100, $200 rent increases. Our market can't sustain that. In our market, it's $5, $10, $15. Most people can handle that without any objections, right? What's happening now, if for the people that are this particular example that I gave you with the 6 unit, he asked us on the phone, can we do a 50 or I think either a $50 or $75 increase? And I'm like, you can, but you're probably going to have the building empty out. You'd have to expect that. It's too much of a hit of a one when you're paying a $600 rent.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
you increase it by $75.
That's over. Yeah, that's a big percentage. That's over 10.
Our regulations, we can do it as landlords. I can double the rent if I wanted to. We have no limits or on our increases. But at the end of the day, we just couldn't do that. It wouldn't be the right thing to do. So that's what not doing, not starting out right and not doing these regular yearly increases put you in that bad position 2 or 3 years down the road where you're like, oh, geez, I gotta do a big increase here to catch up. And then who's on the bad end of it? It's going to be the tenant.
So part of what you're saying is to make sure to manage the expectation with the tenant from the very beginning. It's in your contract with them. And it sounds like you verbally go over this with them to make sure that they hear this.
Absolutely.
Because I found with contracts, the big downside of contracts is they don't matter until it's too late, right? Until you're in a legal
Yes.
dispute or you're at
Yes.
war. And so
Yep.
people, my rule with contracts or proposals or any quotes or anything like that is it's not what people think it says, it's what they heard you say, right? So that matters because it could be in there,
Yep.
but it doesn't matter until
Yep.
it's already too late and there's a problem. So you need to verbally go over this with them, that there's going to be rent increases to prepare them for that. So in regards to that, how long do you usually spend with a tenant going over the lease? Some people just send out a lease and
Our
just sign this, or just have them sign it.
No, no. So for us, signing a lease is probably one of the biggest and most important parts of the entire experience for a tenant, right? This is where they really get to sit down and get to know you as a property manager and as a landlord. Our average times are about a half hour to an hour going through each lease. So they come into our office, we prepare the 2 sets of documents for them to review. We go through each clause with them, explaining what they mean. Go over details. In addition, we have what we call a Schedule A, which is basically a list of rules and regulations of that property, because the rules are different in a single family home versus a 54 unit apartment building. Whether if it's a condo, we have to explain to them bylaws and all these different things. So signing that lease is crucial for us. We have to make sure that they understand everything. They sign off on it. They initial where they need to initial. And everything is verbally told to them so that they properly understand.
Nice.
That's step one. So going exactly to what you just said, we sign year leases, which is a norm in the industry, I think everywhere. They will forget typically at, if month 12 comes rolling around and we call them the night before and say, oh, by the way, I need new checks, but don't forget it's $20 more. They'll be like, oh, damn, it's like a big surprise. They haven't mentally prepared for it, or maybe some need to financially prepare for it. So we have a process that we call all of our tenants 90, 60 days before the end of their terms for every lease, because you want to know how things are going at the 90-day lease, kind of touch base with them, see how things are going. 60 days, we want to find out what they're doing. Are they renewing? And that's where we kind of start alluding to the fact that, if you remember, we had a rent increase, from day one, and it's going to be effective as of 2 months from now. So if we have to adjust any payment plans that
so you're preparing them for the blow, right? So you're letting them know, hey,
absolutely.
This was coming, and you actually have call through all of these. So if you have how many units total? Like around 1,300. So 1,300 phone calls a year just to notify on rent increases, or wow. So
no, it's not the purpose of the call is not just for a rent increase. It's a touch point. It's customer service. It's tenant retention. Call them. How you doing? Is there anything that we need to look at? There's many great things, and a lot of property managers, I think, have that wrong. I think you should be talking to your tenants.
So it's a preparatory thing also to find maybe maintenance issues, hear concerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can maintain and keep these tenants, especially if they're good, right? Yeah, I love it.
Yep.
So it increases your availability then, which is like the hallmark of customer service. It's foundational, accuracy and availability. And by being that available, your accuracy is going to go up as well. So love it. So
yeah, they appreciate the call. They appreciate that reminder, and kind of, you don't want to be put in a position where the tenant feels like they're being blindsided. Oh, they're just always after my money. It's, if you prepare them, they're not going to be
right. So the call might be, hey, this is Sue over at ground floor, just reaching out to let you know that, you're at this stage in your lease, and here's some things that are coming up, and I wanted to find out from you how the property is, and does your team have a list of things that they go through then on each of these calls? And then, and how do you keep track of these? How do you know when it's 60 to 90 days is coming up, and how do you logistically manage that?
So all of our staff in the office are given certain tasks, and this particular task is assigned to one of our admins. So every month, that's part of one of our duties is to print out the different lease ending dates through our management software. So it very nicely puts in our dashboard all the leases that are 90, 60 days. So she prints them out, she calls them, and she does her thing. It's very, very
Cool.
systematic.
Do you think some people might be thinking,
Yep.
I don't have the bandwidth to do that. I don't have Tony's team. I'm a small property manager. Do you think it would be as effective to use email or things like that, or probably not?
I think email could work. I think if it's something, the calls are not lengthy. They're a few minutes. I think they're important enough to warrant a phone call. If you cannot reach them, then yeah, we do.
Now, what about inspections at
But
those times? Would during inspections, would this be a time to also bring this up again, or is that not generally the case?
No, not the case. It's a different staff that would be handling that type of stuff. So, yeah, this would be mostly administrative within an office.
So if they were small enough property manager and they're doing just about everything, then that might also do dual purpose then. So it can collapse something right there. Okay.
Absolutely. I think the smaller you are, the more touch points they have with their tenants anyway. I remember when I only had a few hundred doors, I knew every tenant by name. I spoke to them. I was always at the buildings. You have less overhead. You have less stuff to worry about and do. So I think the touch point with a smaller property manager is much higher than probably someone.
Yeah, there's a natural barrier to feedback that happens as you grow and as you build out a team. Which is one of the reasons that we have the gathered kudos tool that we have for reputation. So same thing with my own business. As soon as you have a team, you instantly have a barrier to feedback, even if your team's small, because they're the ones touching the customer, not you. And they might be touching them in a nice way and they might not be. So so good point. So you mentioned item one, make sure that you go over this from the get-go with the tenant. 2, make sure that you let them know that it's coming, doing these calls. And what about on the owner side? Because you mentioned at the beginning the owner challenge. And is there any other steps that you do with the tenant in that regard before we move on to that? So
pretty much it's once the touch points have been made, there will always be, we try to go for the 80-20 rule in this case. You're not going to probably be able to get 100% increases in place. You are going to get challenged at some point in time throughout different tenants, whether if it's a financial issue, they just can't afford it. And you're going to bend, in certain circumstances. You've had a tenant there for 10 years and something happened where he just really, really cannot afford this extra $15 a month in rent. And, and that's where we have to, be a little bit more, compassionate, realistic about the situation. And we're not going to go out and throw somebody out just because of that. So an 80-20 rule is probably a good way of seeing the end result. There's really no other discussions from a tenant except for if there's any kind of going back and forth. We would usually speak to them just before the actual increase takes place, because either we have to get new post-dated checks if that's how they pay, or if they're in some sort of pre-authorized payment system, we'll probably advise them the day or a few days before their rents come out, just to let them know, listen, don't forget your rent has increased this month by $15, so you're going to see that difference in the in the debit of your account. On the owner side, the owners, listen, at the end of the day, 95% of my portfolio I manage for property investors out of province and out of country for a lot of cases. They're relying on us as property managers to make the right decisions. Now, personally here in our market, we've just gone through 3 of the worst years in over 40 years in our market. Incredible amount of new units being put on the market, which was driving the rents down and causing a lot of vacancies in the older units that weren't kept up. So we had a number of those types of units, and unfortunately, there were a lot of circumstances where raising the rents just wasn't doable, and you're gonna run into that. So from an owner perspective, it's just really a matter of, again, communication is key to this industry. If you're not communicating with your staff, your tenants, and your owners, you will be out of business pretty quick. So communicating the income challenges, personally, what we do with our business is many of our large owners or the owners that request it, we have monthly financial meetings with them to review the income and expenses of their properties and forecast, right? Again, you're running a business. These are, these are discussions that you have to have with your owners. So a lot of them we pre-plan for the following year. Okay, what's my utility costs, my heating costs has gone up by 3%, my property taxes have gone up, and my insurance has gone up. What does that going to equate in terms of a rent increase that I need to be able to cover?
So, and the owners, then it sounds like if you're keeping the owners really well informed, you're communicating with them. If you're establishing yourself also as an authority, they're trusting you to manage this investment for them. And if you run it like an investment and run it like a business, yes, most of the time they're going to probably go along with whatever advice you give them. Especially if they feel you are the expert. Correct. I think where a lot of property managers or business owners in general Correct. Run into the problem is where they no longer have the confidence or display the confidence that they're the expert at what they do. And as soon as people catch wind of that, or they smell that, or whatever, it's like they start to micromanage you, and they start wanting you to make all these changes. Yeah.
So the old philosophy, and many property managers still adhere to this, and personally, I can't stand it, is no news is good news. I think the old school of thought in the property management industry is, I buy a building, I get a property manager, I collect my check every month. Don't call me unless the building's on fire. Personally, I have a hard time with that. I like communicating with my owners. I like telling them what's going on. Even if it's a one-way street, I'm covering myself. Like, we do all sorts of things in terms of monthly financial reports, newsletters that we provide to our tenants, monthly general updates of the market conditions, seasonal emails, letting them know what's going on with the market. They need to hear from you, or else, exactly what you said, they will lose faith in your ability. If they haven't talked to you in 6 months or a year,
the first thing is
all of a sudden, I don't know, a problem comes up, they're going to say, you suck. What are you doing? You're horrible.
Yeah.
I haven't heard from you.
Did you say you came from the IT background?
All right.
Okay,
I was software engineer.
So I was pretty nerdy myself, and in the IT industry, which I hated doing IT, it's the same sort of thing. I realized pretty quickly that in IT, if you're doing your job really well, nobody notices you. Everything's working. Computers are working, network's working, servers are up, everything's great, and nobody notices you. And they think you're doing nothing. And so then they start questioning, like, why are we paying you? And it's the same thing with the property manager.
Why do we need you?
There's nothing going on. So I don't even need you. I could probably do this myself. They would start to think. And so if you are, so I realized really quickly that, and the only time if there were problems with the server or problems with the property or whatever, if problems come up, then they think, oh, well, you're not doing your job. Like, you're not doing a great job. It's your fault, right? So so if you're giving them lots and lots of positive touch points and information, and letting them know what's going on, and letting them know, hey, we're doing this month, we're doing, sprinkler clear outs or whatever for winter, we're doing this, we're just all the things you're doing to make sure that they know that you're involved with the property and keeping them informed, they're going to just sit back and not worry about it. A lot of times probably not contact you. Now, when they start reaching out, like I've noticed with just in my own business, like website projects, if a client's reaching out to us, that's an indicator that we aren't communicating often enough with them about the project or where it's going. Now, sometimes people are really impatient. Our projects go really quickly, right? So we're communicating a lot. But if we don't communicate for a few days, and they're like, where's everything at? So if we get that a lot, and we're getting a lot of that, it's a pretty strong indicator. So property managers, if you're getting lots of contacts from owners saying, what's going on with my property? Or that's a negative. So you need to be proactively keeping them informed. And this directly relates to what you're talking about in increasing rent. Yeah. You need to be letting them know that this is coming up. Hey, I let the tenant know. We called them. We let them know that we did this, we did that. And they're going to think, man, these guys are on top of it. They're on top of increasing rent, which is going to get me more money or help me maintain the property. And I think that nothing shows a owner that you care more about their investment than probably getting them more money. Right?
Yep, absolutely. And there's our motto at our office and within our brand is you need to make an owner feel like an owner.
Love it.
You need to make them feel like they have a team behind them, that we're backing them up. We're providing them with reports. We're providing them with statistics.
Make the property owner feel like a business
in the background working on their behalf.
Yeah, love it.
You bet. And that's
cool. So any other challenges that you see in raising rents or that are common, or anything we didn't cover?
I think at the end of the day, you need to plan for them. You need to have your systems in place so that they're automatic, and then you can deal with the one-off cases as they come and deal with them, and look to get an 80-20 rule. If you have it in place, you've properly communicated it, everybody's aware, there's no big surprises, things are going to happen, you're going to let some slide. But I think, in my opinion, it all starts with that first meeting, the signing of the lease with the tenant, and the proper, the proper expectations have been set in place.
So have a process, have a procedure, and then be flexible for the 80-20, for the 20% that may have issues or will fight. Okay. Cool. So hopefully everybody watching this got some good value out of this and feels a little bit more comfortable increasing rent. And if for property managers that have not done this, like they're stuck, they're already in this situation where they haven't been doing this, how would you recommend they start doing this? Just with new contracts, or how would they go back to their existing clients and existing tenants to start changing the game?
Yeah, great question. I think so. There's twofolds. I think one, make an adjustment to your sign up process in terms of your lease signings. Make sure that that's applicable to all new leases coming into the firm. With existing tenants, you kind of got to be careful. So I would analyze building or property by property. I would look at the terms, the length that my tenant's been there. If it's somebody that's been there 5 years and the rent hasn't increased, that should be a pretty easy conversation. I don't think you're going to be challenged if you go to them and say, if it's $1,000 rent and you say, we need to increase your rent by $10 or $15. It hasn't increased over the last 5 years. Here's been the increase in expenses over the last 2 years. Make sure you justify it, right? You want to make sure that your tenants don't feel like you're just grabbing for money. Right? Be prepared if they ask. So if they ask you, well, why are you raising my rents? Well, if you notice, I just put a new roof on the apartment building or the house. I just replaced all the windows. I just gave you a new fridge and a new stove. I just did all the carpets in the hallways, right? Explain to them. They may need to hear it.
It's another great reason to make sure that the properties are being well maintained and that you're doing things. It's going to give you the opportunity to raise the rent and keep the properties at a higher level so that you continue to attract good tenants, instead of consistently worse and worse tenants and consistently worse and worse condition of the property.
At the end of the day, the rent increases are needed in order to run the property, right? You need that extra income to make sure that you're keeping up with the property. You're making sure that all the capital expenditures are being taken care of, the major components, upgrades over time. A lot of this money is just reinvested back in the property. So there's a way of communicating that with your tenants and making sure that that they can feel that. And yeah, as you said, if they've been calling you for the last 2 years to fix their sink and you haven't gone, well, you may have some problems getting extra money from them.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting that I think for property managers that, especially if they're in the single family home market, where there's probably a lot more property managers doing percentage of rent, there's a built-in incentive for the property manager then to also increase the rent, right? And so it's a win-win. Of course, it's the win-win for the property manager and for the property owner to increase the rent. And yeah, I think if they view you as a partner in that regard, that we're going to make this money together, and then they're part owner, right? Mm-hmm. In the business somewhat, like you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the ABCs of money. One of the first places where you go look for new money.
Yeah, your number one prospect is always going to be your existing client.
Right. So
number one prospect
as a property manager.
So cool. Well, Tony, this is really useful, really informational. I think there may be some other topics that might be worth chatting on in the future. I appreciate you swinging by, and I know it's late over there on the Atlantic coast there area. Yeah,
New Brunswick.
So, and we're way over here in Pacific. There's a cool little map up in the corner here on our blab that shows where the viewers are at. Looks like we have a few other people watching now. So, cool. So, Jason Hole with DoorGrow. Tony, you want to plug your website and tell us where people can find your business in case you want to show this off to your people?
Sure. Absolutely. So Absolutely. You can find us, our company website is groundfloorpm.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn or on Facebook.
Awesome.
Just search
Great.
Tony LeBlanc.
Thanks, Tony. And appreciate you taking time out. So this is Jason Hull here with the DoorGrow Show, where we talk about property management tips. We'll talk with badass experts in the property management industry. And you can check this out at doorgrow.com. Thanks.